Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The eyes that carried us forth. And how history has crystallized towards a sort of excellence, a sort of display of skill and activity. That means as intelligence has occurred, has moved on the surface of this rock, it has become sophisticated. And it has become sophisticated, I personally consider, the mainstream is a bit different, but I consider that there is an external processing of reality and there's an inner processing of reality. Now, when I say the eyes that carried us forth, I am trying to bring into light both values. The lives of all the people. Think about all your ancestors who their eyes and what was in their sight drew them, forth. The eyes that carried us forth, the lives that were lived, and how all our ancestors, regardless of everything they saw, they still had an inner constitution. And I feel that if we truly ascribe consciousness to the biological body, we see that there is a genetical pattern that echoes. And what if the inner vision of our ancestors echoes also? That's a fascinating question. Now, at the same time, ancient traditions, they see the inner realms of all of us as one. That means I remember Joe Rogan, this comedian, he said something very interesting, that he was under the influence of some substance and he was on a boat. And he, in some sense, felt he was looking at dolphins and he's like, what if consciousness really is in all bodies? Sometimes in many cultures you can see parallels as if like, regardless of what the ideology is, because the human experience has certain similarities, sometimes we find similar ways of perceiving the unknown as well. And so the idea really is that Alan Watts even said it well. He said in in the West, you wake up and you say, "I'm God. I realized I'm God." People are gonna be like, "Get this man out of this Starbucks." And then you see like, and then you see, for example, in India, if you say, "I have realized I'm God," they will kind of be like, as Alan once said, it's like, finally you realize. You see, it's all about the cultural program that is suggesting what behaviors are okay or not. And it's not just culture. I see it as if we are present in a very multidimensional system. And this multidimensional system originates from our awareness. That means literally in my deep sleep, I am not anybody. I am not even thinking of anything. In deep sleep, it's like a gap in my conscious wakefulness. And the psychology can identify both ways, by the way. What does that mean? That means you can feel that consciousness has always been, or you can feel that the gap has always been. In some cultures, they honor their ancestors. In native traditions, the spirits of their ancestors walked behind them. The spirit didn't die, the body changed. The body was like a rented car from nature, you know. There is something that I personally realized, that in the attempt to figure out what has happened on this planet, we don't come across with the exact information. We come across filters. So what that means is, just like when two people attempt to get to know each other, for example, imagine you and your spouse, it's as if like the commitment of the lifetime means two people are, in some sense, they want to learn from each other's minds till as long as the show runs. And it's a kind of, I don't know how to say it, but like there's a sort of unfamiliar territory that must be endured through at the phase of the attainment of anything. Do you know? That means anything new that any being starts off, you have to get your intelligence literally cannot attain a sense of comfort until it sees the angle. So you know what that means? That means it's like you're seeing a part of the room, you're not seeing the whole room, and consciousness has suddenly awoke in this kind of like, even though we're fully conscious on the earth, but because the macrocosmic landscape, just the cosmos, the universe is so big, it's kind of like we're technically still asleep as a species. We're awake on the rock, but we're not awake beyond our clouds. So what I'm kind of saying is that we are hovering in the unknown. And I feel this has been forgotten. And this was the essence of the evocation of, how can I tell you, like right now, I think this is what's happening. The child is being born into a system, and it's being not just spoon-fed food, it is also being spoon-fed ideology, behaviorism, mannerisms, different patterns of processing. You can say the reason, like when you really look at what entertainment is, it's pretty much like we are kind of like survivors, like cast away in our inner realms as creatures. We start off in our inner realms, and there has to be an effort to see more than what we have seen. So I'm kind of telling you that all our ancestors, that when they looked at this world, they all saw the unknown. And when man looks at the unknown, I feel that's like the feeling you share with every living being, or every human being. We don't know how much the squirrel, on the branch of a tree, cares about consciousness, but perhaps we have evolved to ask the questions and to find the answers that will make it that other species don't need to ask the question. I feel there's something so nostalgic, and not just nostalgic. I want to say iridescent, but that's still not the right word. It's like awe, mixing nostalgia and awe. So you're in awe of what you feel you were, something like that. So just think about it. The reason I chose this wallpaper, let me see who the artist is. The artist is John Atkinson Grimshaw. And this is the streets of London. And so, when I saw this picture, there was a resonance, because, let's hope this isn't on mute. Okay. Guys, there was a resonance because I looked at all these people and I thought how hilarious. They thought they were the most advanced creatures. That means in 1,000 years, people are going to be listening to my talks, and they're going to be like, all right, this pioneer tried. That's the thing. There is a simplicity that to our inner realms appears complexity, but to the future generations will be seen as simplicity. That means when you can think about it from a evolutionary biologist kind of standpoint, okay? Let's say you're an evolutionary biologist and you are studying how cells, the evolution of complexity of the effort of the smallest cells. I feel we are kind of like 50% designed by nature and 50% able to design ourselves. There has been a fascination with other forms of sight. Like, I'll tell you a story. This story is a story from Hafez. Hafez is a Sufi mystic poet from, I don't know, 700, 900 years ago from Persia. And let me tell you what happens. At some point, Persian culture was invaded, like the empire, like not the empire, but like it was invaded, and there were certain epic poets that came and kept the culture alive. So these poets suddenly realized like the whole like their civilization is under siege, and in their poetry they try to keep alive what as much as they could see. Can you imagine? It's kind of like this. It's like being this rider on a sinking ship and realizing that the ship is sinking, right? And writing exactly in a couple sentences before the ship sinks exactly what happened, who was on the ship, and all this, and then putting that paper in a bottle and closing it, and then everybody sinks with the ship, but the bottle remains, and somebody finds the bottle and they realize what happened to that shipwreck. You know, in other words, something of sight endured. So Hafez has a story where I kind of learned a lot by just how the story was told. It's in one of his poems in Hafez's poetry collection, in one of his poetry works. So what is the story? So it's back in the day, and back in the day, like, I don't know, 700, 900 years ago, people had, what do you call it? Servants. There was still like slavery around. And so Hafez is actually like he's with a disciple in his poetry. He's saying he's with a disciple. Then guys, check out how he wrote it in his poetry. He said, "Then from the eyes of my heart." He didn't say my body. He didn't say his biological eyes. He said, "From the eyes of my heart, I suddenly saw the prayer of this slave in a cave that was terrified and was just praying to God, please, please get me out." And so what happened is, the story is that Hafez is pretty much in his own, settlement, and he gets an inner vision, his heart's vision, like the eyes of his moment. Suddenly his whole moment gets a perception. And what he sees is there's this slave that has ran away from its masters, and it's kind of like cruel owners and masters and whatnot, and the slave is running. And the slaves ran away into a cave and is like just praying, please, 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 like, God save me, God save me. As if he does easy, as if somebody who's ran out of hell and doesn't want to get pulled back into it, Now look at what happens. In that moment, it's like Hafiz gets an intuitive vision, as if like the universe is telling him to do something. And he looks at his disciple and he says, you have a task, and he gives him a specific instruction to the disciple. And he gives him the exact location of the cave to the disciple. And he says that you are not allowed to say a single word to this person. You just have to bring him back. And if you don't bring him back in time, and if you don't go now, there's going to be there's the slave, the cruel masters are going to come and take him. The disciple listens, and he's seen enough from Hafiz to listen. Enough of his. I can't explain Sufi culture, but like, but they had this kind of like very, very kind of. There was a disciple guru relationship similar to other traditions, Tibetan Buddhism, India, it's a similar kind of oral transmission of reality or awareness. So anyways, the disciple quickly gets on the horse and he runs and he remembers the instruction and he's going to the address Hafiz gave him, And it's kind of like, and while the disciple is going, he's like, there's no way, like, this is the right address, And he runs and he suddenly sees the bewildered, kind of terrified, horrified kind of, slave, right, in the cave. And the moment he goes there, the guy gets happy. He's like, we found him in time. Maybe this is all happening. And the disciple goes in and he right about when he say, hey man, come with us, we're going to get you out of this, situation, right? He can't. He realizes Hafiz has told him that he can't. He's not allowed to. Speak, to the slave. And in that moment, the slave sees it and thinks it's the cruel masters that have come and taken away. And the slave is panicking, like a cornered animal shouting, please no. And this disciple of Hafiz, he eventually has to tie the guy's hand, and like to a horse like you see in movies. And he takes the guy back. Now, so here's the moral of the story, guys. This part's very important. As the disciple is on the horse, he hears the shouts, the screams of the slave, and he's like, no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. He's shouting. And in that moment, what happens is the disciple starts crying. This grown man his inner realm start breaking, because there he realizes why Hafiz had told him you can't speak. He realizes the man was crying, this disciple of Hafiz started crying when the guy was shouting and he couldn't speak, because he realized that how much suffering we endure, but how close is our freedom. And the disciple the disciple pretty much was like, this slave doesn't realize how close he is to stepping out of the illusion, the simulation. So that's another level of sight where your moment of being is already being before you do anything about it. It's like your presence. It's kind of like thinking that When you think of your ancestors, you think that they were, how can you say it? Like it's like a DNA changing faces or evolving into different faces. And so I sometimes look at the world and I'm like, all right, my ancestors all saw the sky. You know, they all saw mountains, they all saw trees, they saw you other human beings. You know, they saw a lot of other stuff, like which was like the beginning of imagination. Because something that I don't think most people know, when the subjective evolution began, as I term it, the subjective evolution began, it was like thoughts appeared as voices to people. So the first time a person had a thought or like a sentence, it was like a instruction. It was like truth. It was like, whoa, something happened, you know? So it's kind of like the eyes that carried us forth are the minds that have sculpted history's excellence so far. And so it's kind of like realizing, compared to people 1,000 years ago, you are really cool. And compared to people from 1,000 years from now, you're not even close. So what I mean by that is that we gotta find a moment in our lives where we wonder about the nature of how our sight is being us and being the moment. And it may be uncommon because when you go towards observing your being, it's actually kind of like a trick idea, because how can you do something to see what you're being? So technically, it's like then you open up to like the Taoistic wisdom of Lao Tzu, where in the Tao Te Ching he says action through inaction. That means when it comes to studying how existence is projecting experience, experience has no other choice other than to be purely still and silent. So that means it's like you can say, if your attention doesn't move, you kind of stop existing. That means, believe it or not, life is not just you're something and you got to be something else. Life is a constant reinvention of how the attention is being the moment to itself. Many people run after work rather than wondering how the moment works. I feel right now in 2020, we're reaching a point where sincerity is returning to the unknown. That means people will, after some point of exerting any kind of effort, realize that there are gaps, again, missing the unknown factors into the moment. Now, seeing an unknown factor, it's kind of like if life was an equation, there's some part of it that is missing. And when something is missing, that means when a cup is empty, you can pour anything in it. And there's a state of the mind that when it realizes emptiness is nothing to fear or constantly react as a subject to, it becomes literally an ability for attention to evoke. So you can say like, it's like right now we feel like individuals. But you see, individuals don't tend to survive, collectives do. I feel every human being, like I constantly speak about, like the effort of life on Earth to be towards an advanced civilization. And when you really look at an advanced civilization, it means the product or whatever the eyes of mankind is leading to. It is a build-up. It's Will Durant. He has this quote. He says, knowledge is the eye of desire and can become the pilot of the soul. I feel that as there is sensory perception, there is an awareness to the sensory. That's how we can classify it. So that means that we are simultaneously it's like we're in life, but then we're wondering, how do we know we're in it if there's not an acknowledgement of that? Like, a lot of human psychology is suffering in dualistic spirals, really. What that means is, like, the person opened their eyes, they look at their world, they have to be a character in a story, and now as they have to be a character in a story, right off the bat, the person suddenly is the sense that they are actually their whole unconscious is set. So you can say, like, there's a known self and an unknown self. There we go. Here, let me make my life easier. Now, that unknown self has an unknown world with it. Now, that unknown world of the unknown self is indistinguishable from each other. That means beyond the known self and the known world and the known self and the unknown world, then it becomes unknown self, unknown world. There is no self. There's no human conception. What I was thinking, I was like, this could be potentially fascinating, that if you looked at from an aerial view over a time span of 10,000 years, like fast forward really quickly, you would kind of get a sense like we are evolving from objects into subjects, and then from subjects into fields of knowing. And this is a pattern that was also I'm not joking, guys, it's in Vedic culture. That means the higher locus, that means Earth this plane of existence is seen as the bottom of this transcendental mountain. And there are higher dimensions, there are also lesser dimensions. But now these higher dimensions, in one of them, the self-consciousness in ancient times was considered to become the avatar of knowledge. So the avatar of knowledge literally means you become the archetype no longer has a world. So it becomes eternal to itself, then becomes inconceivable to itself. So you can say, after evolution beyond into the eternal context, into the field state of mind, there is an evolution into the inconceivable. And after a point, this universe is so well designed that I can tell you, the body can't suffer if the mind is the whole world. The body is just the world changing. Perhaps it is cruel to hold back when you live once. I feel that we have access to a way of acknowledging ourselves that moves beyond the conception of the human being. Therefore, we become attention moving in space. Attention has an ability that after it has sped up moving in the space to echo. And I don't know how to say it, like it's like the snowball effect at such a fast speed that the change in space is like gives off something. Believe it or not, when a person just stares at something, they're looking at their own eyes. And when you look at your own eyes, you're seeing your thoughts move. And when you wonder where your thoughts are, you see they are not tangible. That means that that there's a reason Hegel called it the internal objects, because you can see the shape of it like an object. You can see the shape of the thought, its linguistic translation or its imagery, but you can't touch it. So that means I can remember when I was in India, you know, for 2 months, and I found that we went on this mountain and we saw a grand sunset. Now that image is present with me right now, but it's not, I can't put it on the table and draw on that image. It's an inner image. And that inner image is our name. The way you have a name as a being, your name is an abstract objective reference. That means it's like a subject linked to an object, so you think the subject and the object are the same thing. I feel that eventually the person, if they choose not to be conscious, they will become nature's movement. That means if you are a civilized human being and suddenly your environment becomes so savage, after some point, you suddenly drop the archetypes of civility, and those archetypes go return to the abyss, and savage archetypes come. So we have to start to realize that like a percentage of our inner realms is how our external environments look. And there was like this family. It was like, who were they? The Medici family. They were bankers with, of course, questionable motives, but like they at least did something smart. That they looked at cities and they were like, "We're gonna make cities the most beautiful they can be." That means they realized that if the ecosystem was advanced, so would be the creature living in it. And right now we're not living in an advanced civilization. People are not waking up and they're like, oh my god, I'm alive once and a member of this human civilization once. How advanced could our species be or become? People don't wake up thinking like that. They don't care. They just want to, wear the masks of their desire before they have to take off every idea they have ever had and stare at the abyss. When we fear the abyss, then it's easy to become hedonistic. You can say when you have nothing to lose, it's strange. It has, I guess, an advantage and a disadvantage. When you have nothing to lose, you can endlessly stand unresponsive. So you can have the worst things happen and just watch. Which some sages did back in the day. you know? And it's strange. It's like, it was kind of like if a meteor is hitting Earth, what can you do? You can watch. And if a level of chaos appears, before the level of order can find it, like what that means is when your body, for example, there's a wound, white blood cells, are like, get out of here, bacteria. So the white blood cells kind of go to assist. So when you look at the biology, you're getting evidence. Oh my God, defense mechanism. So when you look at life, and if you realize for a second it was alive, you know, imagine seeing this world alive. You know, there's something, there's an unknown majesty to it. I don't know how to say it. It's like there's two kinds of awe. There's an awe of the extraterrestrial, and then there is the awe of the I don't know how to tell you. It's not. It's like the other terrestrial. You know. That means I am telling you, we have to treat our educational system as a galactic force of clarity, because really we have nowhere else to go. I mean, like, imagine after we live on Earth, and we advance to a technological capability to become interstellar civilization. And I speak on this, but the point is, like, after some point, if you don't do anything in the moment and you just watch, or you just, like, it's like this. It's like if you don't communicate your inner realms, you just saw them and that's it. Is that not the case? So guys, give me a second so I can read what's going on in the chat. So welcome everyone. Brand says universe. Brand 30 acres says universe keeps telling me I go back to the golden age of man. Also, it told me that I incarnated as Edward the First of England, also King James. The one that is Zeus was the boss. Let me tell you something interesting, Brant. Do you know that selfhood, it's like there's a memory, I don't know how to say it. Let me see how I can say it. Just a second, guys. This song I've got in the background is just like too intense. I feel that the mind has an ability to animate stories. Now, my whole thing is that the language can't contain truth. So how I acknowledge my inner realms is that I don't feel I'm a thought. That's the thing I'm telling people. It's like you are experientially, then thought is arising. Do you know you're not the thought? You know that it's like two dimensions simultaneously, where in one dimension man is an object or a form, a subject, and the observer of the simultaneity of how the object and subject are being watched. I'm telling you, it's like when the moment we see we are beyond dualism, we are pretty much, experience is freed from its attachment to shape. It's back in the day in ancient Greece, if you didn't believe gods were walking on clouds, people would be like, "Get out of here, man. You're not up to date." But the thing is that you, like, the inner realms, no, like, every person has to realize this. Nobody has your eyes. We're not clones. Nobody has your eyes. That is the value of them, really. That is the value of your inner realm, especially for a species that has recently opened up to communication. Like I was honestly saying, guys, like, if we were looking from an aerial view at the planet, you tell me what is the most advanced thing we can do, Imagine if there were extraterrestrials watching, what would be the most advanced activity that human beings can do? And I am telling you, it is the communication. So what's happening is there needs to come this renaissance of an internal force. So what does that mean? That means usually we are like living an inner life, and then when you are in society, that not the whole, like, how can I tell you? It's like you live your role, for example. Do you know what I mean? That means how a person is to themselves can be timeless, but how they are to others can be in different times different. So, for example, I sit here and I speak to you guys and I say, all right, Mr. Within, da 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 da. But when I'm not giving these talks, I am not too much as a thought to myself. I watch thoughts mainly. When I was younger, I would react to thoughts. That means when someone would say something, I wouldn't even hear what they were saying. It was just like sound would enter my ear and it would bewilder me. It's like, the thing is, though, the inner life has to be preserved through attention. And that's why kind of they spoke about the inner child in psychology. What does that mean? That means your youth attempted something, and that attempt is still in question, and then your future, you have moved past that archetype and you've lived through various different archetypes, but that archetype is still unresolved. That image of how phenomena is was still unresolved. The inner realms really, like, what's his name? Heraclitus, it seems, he developed first the concept of the logos. And the logos was this inner guiding voice. That means the ancient Greeks heard the voice. They saw a soul to the universe, not just to their personal mind. The poet Rumi says, a bird requires two wings to fly, and a mind requires chaos in order to exist. So if you want to be a person in this life, you have to stabilize to some degree an axis of chaos and order, or your value on life will change from every event. So that means every single thing that happens, it can direct you guys. Let me tell you, in 2000, I can tell you it. I think it started from 2013 to 2016. I was in in 2006. Sorry, in 2000 from 2013 to 2016. I was dependent on my inner realms in a way it was like this hidden shamanic life I was living with the world. And that hidden shamanic life was me noticing the moment moving prior to thought arriving. So noticing something in the space between the thoughts that a person has throughout the day. What you notice in the space between the thoughts is an awareness to how the self and world is projected. So really, when human beings go to study life, what are we studying? Self and a world. Now, what's the whole grand mystery of consciousness, and in regards to philosophy, what are the great questions? Okay, is the self known or is the self unknown? And then the other question is the world known, is the world unknown? Did the world lead to the self? Or did the self lead to the world? Now, I am saying to you in these talks, there's a simultaneity of both. Just like we have two eyes that see the same. It's as if, like, thinking of, like, your DNA is sculpted by how your ancestors interpreted chaos and order throughout their day-to-day life. You know? They did this test, believe it or not, on, I don't describe, I feel that free will I feel that for too long, man is evolving into the multidimensional. Now, what that would mean is either it would mean the void, an entrance towards the void, or it would mean infinity. Now, infinity is good. What that means is when you're in manifestation, pretty much what do you do when you're on an island? You got to build stuff or you'll go insane. So you try to build a city if you're cast away in an island. Do you know what? There is an antiquity and a sort of ancient vibe to existing. Do you know that there's been some nights where I've kind of just like felt the moment and I'm like, I'm the new thing to the system. The system's been here. It's as if we're all guests in the guy in mind. And we're required to listen to the guy in mind, you know. You know, guys, the soul is so mysterious that really that's as far as we can look at. For me, it's all this, guys. If you it's like whether you identify with the content in your attention mainly, or you identify with the one looking. If the person abides, that means just studies, that the observer that is just present, you will eventually realize that before there was a stage in the child psychology where it was pre-thought, pre-language. So what does that mean? That means we're like these 8 billion creatures on a rock, so strictly keeping the validity of the world through subjects, not realizing that all of this is hovering in the middle of nowhere because we chose to ascribe symbols and words to a location. We put the meaning literally in the atom. We drew its shape on the page. You know? So that's like, you see, after some point when you in anywhere you live, let me tell you what happens. Let's say right now you're a person who every day your job is the same thing. Let's say it's not even a job of the mind, it's just a labor job. You know, let's say every day you're doing that labor job. So of course there's one view is like, what is this? The person's going insane because it's just same thing. Or the person realizes that they can attempt. Sometimes when you can't update the external, it doesn't mean you can't update the internal. You know, that means if you go on Google and search for like awesome workers, you'll see this montage of all these people in just a majority of them in third world countries and other countries, you know, just many countries from different countries where these people have mastered cooking as if the guy has made in his lifetime probably over like 100,000 loaves of bread, you know, and like the bakers all respected him, you know, but nobody else knew. But you see what I mean? Like it's that it's like your mind is not limited to the stuff in the space because imagination tends to be a parallel deviation of it. So it's kind of like before you move or say anything, your multidimensional potential, the moment that a person acts and does something, it's as if they've set something in motion. Do you know, for me at some point I'm like, oh my God, do you know, life is like playing the piano. Like, really? Now, how is it like playing the piano? Every moment is pressed into is activated. Now, when I say study your attention, that's very crucial because think about it. Like, 8 billion creatures on a rock, when we forget that, in the 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, when we forget that statement, we begin slowly becoming devoured by the stories that we don't choose to look beyond. The moment, if imagine the species realizes, oh my God, everybody has an inner realm. Why is there discrimination? Why is there rudeness? Why is there anger? Can we imagine a civilization that gets angry that it got angry? Not just it gets angry at states that are not angry, you know? So I'm telling you, I sometimes look at it in life, and I've said it, that there's this vibe and there's this feeling in life that sometimes you're a step behind. And they say it's like when you chase the butterfly, you're a step behind. But if you sit still and silent, the butterfly comes to you, okay? Comes and lands on your forehead. So what does that mean? There's an important moral there. Now I feel that one way is, yeah, you just remain still, find your own pace, and then move that way as a being. The other is that you don't give up so easily on the challenge of the moment, and you think about it. All right. So I mean, like, I'll tell you this. I did catch butterflies with plastic bags and release them as a kid. But let me tell you the way you got to do it. It's just about the acceleration of the intensity of the speed. Do you know? So think of it this way. In an emergency, suddenly groups of people gather around and lift that vehicle and get that person to safety. You know, the person got into the accident. So what is that? In the time of emergency, there was suddenly an importance, and that importance activated the effort and the momentum of everybody. It's like, oh my God, this is an actual living moment. Let's do something. Do you know? So one way is, yeah, you sit still and life finds you. I feel that's pretty much the traditional path. That means it's like, go find your decent and simplest self and then abide in it, and you'll suddenly realize the complexity of your own nature. Okay, that's a path. The other way is that, okay, so if you want to chase one thing, yeah, you might be a step behind, and karmically you might not feel you deserve it because you're chasing it. Anything a person chases too long, slowly their psychology descends into what I would say is sort of devaluation of their morality. So anytime you feel unnatural as a being, you're kind of like feeling embarrassed in front of yourself, making you subconsciously move away from the environment. Do you know what I mean? That means people are not just responding to an outer environment. They're responding to the infusion of their inner environment with the outer environment. You know? So for me, it's like you got to think a bunch of steps ahead. So I was like, wait a minute. So if I don't deserve one step that I chase, let's say one step ahead, if I don't deserve that, what if I attempt three steps, what if I attempt 10 steps ahead? I might at least deserve the fourth, which is much more than if I was just attempting the one. So what that means is, I feel that the human being, it's kind of like all our activities, all the projects of our lives, and how our minds project us into intelligent activity on this earth. It's like a song. It's like people's brains are playing music. What it's coming across is their individualism, you know? Who knew personality, was playing an instrument, So this is why it's like we can study the attention and eventually reach the edge of definition. And that in that moment, our eyes will be inseparable from the whole moment. That means I don't think of the concept of a soul as this transmigrating thing, because the concept of time, how does it exist for an eternal being? That means, isn't it strange that we find that in the Buddhic paradigm, even though Buddhism has like there's the Buddha's eyes were very open, but I'm telling you, there is this idea to consider. Wait a minute, is an eternal being endlessly reincarnating in different times? And it's like, who's keeping the watch between the lives? Do you know? And you see, there is no watch between the lives. So we, as much as we are creatures of matter, I am saying we're creatures of space. How easily we feel space is nothing. Yet it holds everything, does it not? So imagine your inner space. So don't just be fascinated by your inner vision, your thought, or what you perceive or imagine. Also be fascinated in the space that has allowed that. How is that happening? And I feel the evolution of the intellect, or literally like right now, knowledge is, educational systems are a bit strange, you know? You know, they're technically like not increasing the potential of learning. They're kind of like, you, once you get out of the educational system, you're like, you know, you feel like you, let me tell you, life is all about where you're walking to. So that means how far you've seen. And if you for a second start depending on your own vision, something strange happens. Life suddenly stops being artificial. People think they have to get rid of thoughts. It's like that concept is, it doesn't stand. The best way I can say a person should perceive thoughts or inner visions or their inner realms is like Chung Tzu said, like leaves on a tree. They pass and change in the seasons. Every day you wake up, if you're considering yourself as a new self, how can you have the same thoughts? How can you have the same beliefs? Isn't it weird? It's like, how could it be a new day if you're not a new self? And if you're a new self, how could you have the same belief? So isn't it strange that who you were 10 years ago is not who you are now? Both physically, like the cells of the body change every 2 weeks, and the ideology changes. So when we look at life and we see all this stuff is changing, right? Who is believing here? Who thinks they have a future life and past life? So that's what I'm saying. For me, metaphysics has come down to this giant sphere, this which I call the linguistic simulation, which we're all in. And those who I've only seen certain philosophers continental philosophers try to break it. The analytical philosophers kind of like embrace the simulation, the linguistic simulation. That means you see all branches of knowledge, you know what they are? They're just different languages. When you see the trees of knowledge, the branches of the trees of knowledge are language, then you become fascinated with how has your mind kind of produced language. Your personality is a creative act. So how is there human beings feeling they're not creative in this world? I don't get it. Because the nature of it is we are aware of change. That's why we can do something about it. You know? So in our effort to wonder how far the eyes of our ancestors have brought us, we are in the middle of this, suddenly realizing the value of our own eyes. And I feel the value of life is kind of seeing what is accessible and then engaging. Because life is not, you got to think about it. It's like, what's the life purpose of a battery? You know, once it finds the right thing, that means we are an energetic phenomena that can have a certain output. So for me, a human being not engaging the advancement of their civilization is like literally like a candle where nobody sees the light. We have to begin projecting our inner realms, and I'm encouraging everyone who's listening, now more than ever, it's important to bring the multidimensional renaissance. The multidimensional renaissance is when all the inner realms of these 8 billion creatures, this kind of bewildered, maddened, 8 billion overpopulated kind of on a rock species, suddenly thought, what's the best thing I can do? And it's kind of like Dylan Thomas saw ahead of all of us. And he looked at his father on his deathbed, Dylan Thomas the poet, and he said, don't go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. And so that means that we are a potential of design. And civilization is not that advanced. Hopefully in the future, you just live a natural life as a human being, and civilization can see you enough to come and find you. but we don't have that kind of privilege right now. Our civilization is like a fax machine. That's how advanced it is. I'm serious. That means even if we create AI, all right, the fax machine we put more paper in it. You know, it's kind of like trees and all of nature is looking at us. And let's say if trees could talk, they'd be like, all right, you guys are at least destroying us. At least use the paper to write something on it. Don't just stare at a blank page. You know. Guys, I consider throwing a blank piece of paper out is a sin. No, as a kind of writer at heart, I'm telling you, if you throw a blank piece of paper in the trash, you know, with no ink, not a drop of ink on that. I feel that's a universal sin. Do you know that means people who will kind of open their eyes in history will be like, how dare you? History's excellence must be strived for. We are literally like, you have to play your song before you die, whoever you are listening. And this song doesn't mean just, it means you kind of realizing your inner realms, finding contentment with how your inner realms happen, with both the known and unknown aspect of your inner realms, then finding immediately contentment with the objective and the subjective. With the objective realm. So pretty much I'm telling you, you got to be comfortable with being a physical being and being comfortable with physical space, being in a world, and also being to be able to be comfortable with stuff, singular stuff in the world. Now, after you're comfortable with that, it's kind of like you're like, what next? And then it's the dualisms of the mind. And so the internal objects are kind of wavering, flickering kind of archetypes between the spectrums of good and bad you have considered yourself. Jake, in the comment section, you say, well, sometimes I fold the blank page into origami. Now, this is very complex, man, because technically you used the paper and gave it a purpose, but there was no ink. So if you throw that origami bird away, that means it's like you've committed a sin. But if you go and put that origami bird in a river or in a fountain or somewhere, you know, or on a table in like a senior house or something, So I'm telling you, it's like I'm being playful here, of course, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think I can find it. I remember writing this epic poem years ago, and this poem was this long poem. It was one of the longest poems I'd written, and it was a conversation between a leaf. Sorry, not a leaf, a tree, and a blank piece of paper that the wind had blown on the tree. And it was a reunion of, I had made it of mother and son, but the son had the personality of a soldier that had returned from the battlefield. So that means it's like I'd kind of seen the archetype of the paper as the transformed son after being through war, and the tree as the mother. And it was like this conversation between this piece of paper and this tree. You know, I can't find the poem, but I'm gonna post it probably in the Patreon. I feel there's something about stories that they appear as a parallel world. And I'm thinking right now, how many moments in my life till now, you know, I have seen myself in different ways. I've literally seen my own conception in different ways. It's like you see yourself in, sometimes in a good light, sometimes in a bad light, and in a long enough timeline, you'll see both in many times. But it's like after some point, how long can the character just walk in an infinite story? How long can we just think about it like as a species? How long can we be immortal? How long can we keep this natural biological form enduring throughout the space-time continuum? And I speak of Civilization 2.0, Phase 3, to be a sort of, Phase 4 especially, to be a sort of effort where we are releasing advanced AI to go prepare the whole solar system, and human beings in giant spaceships are kind of like heading towards the prepared kind of civilizations on different planets. That means how long can we explore a universe with billion trillion stars? And how long should we? It's like this candle has been lit after 4 billion years, and now we're like, all right, what do we do? This painting gives me a vibe for some reason to share with you a Napoleon story. Napoleon, he has, just a second, guys, let me check something. Alright, guys, I found the perfect song to tell this story to. Napoleon Bonaparte, this French emperor, it's kind of fascinating to kind of see his inner realms. There's a story he has the French army with him, the French people with him, and he's going back to take the palace from one of the Louis kings. And one of these Louis kings, what do you call it? I think it was Louis. I don't know which Louis it was, but it was one of the Louis. You know. And so Napoleon, he comes to the in front of the palace, and there are French guards who have to stay humble, as if they're incredible palace guards, and they're not laying down, their weapons. And there's this moment that Napoleon comes, and his Frenchmen are pointing guns at other Frenchmen who are defending the palace, which what the Louis is hiding in, the Louis King, one of the King Louis. You know what I mean? So in that situation, Napoleon just raises his right hand and just slightly brings it down. And in that instant, all his men put down their weapons. They take away their weapons. And in that moment, Napoleon goes up and the soldiers are just pointing their guns at him. And he opens his jacket, and it was like winter. He opens his jacket and he says, and he's holding it open as if he's being vulnerable. He's being like as if he's showing these Imperial Palace guards that he's not afraid, you know? And so he opens his jacket and he shouts like a lion. He says, "Who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor?" Like he's shouting this. And in that instant, all those palace guards are like, the real emperor is standing in front of us, not the one hiding behind these walls. And in that instant, what happens? People shout, oh, our emperor. And, there's an artist. Let me see if I can find the painting for you. Some artist did a nice painting on this exact moment of the story. Uh, I think I found the picture. Could be this or, yeah. Alright guys, just a second. This is the picture of the story, I think. There we go. So guys, that's the picture. That's the picture of the story I was telling you. And this man, in his mind, he was already emperor. That means his inner realms had perceived something of the outer realms. Pretty much he's sculpting. So like Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. So it's as if your eyes open, you see a certain vision, a certain design of the inner realms projected on the outer, then you walk towards it. And you're also walking in it. How can I tell you? It's like every step is its own experience, similar to how even a person runs a business or a person does any long-term project. You're going through various experiences. Just like that, they say like 10,000 hours, you do something, you attain a mastery of it. So similarly, it's like each moment of repetition becomes a reference of how experience can move in the moment. So it's as if the more you do something, the more parallel dimensions, experiential dimensions of that action you're building up, you know? So that means the next time you're kind of like doing that action, there's much more context, much more inner adjustment before the external action is done, you know? There was a time where I was at a gas station and I was just looking at a sign, like the price of a gas on, not the sign on the gas machine, but on the gas tank. I was just looking at a sign, and for a second I felt as if my eyes had been present longer than my physical existence. And I don't know how to explain that feeling, but it's just a sort of reverse engineering back into attention, pure attention. So what that means is I feel the child's mind, it's just non-segmented attention. It's like the attention hasn't classified into various categories yet. The child's mind is literally being the whole moment. Then, based on how the child is communicated to, the child becomes an individual. So it's the environment that really evokes our individuality. And if our environment is inefficient, we will feel like inefficient individuals when we're alive. If our environment is efficient, we will feel like efficient individuals when we're alive. Now, what's the greatest environment to make efficient? It is the global environment. It is the recognition that we only have. It's like, think of it this way. Imagine you found 8 billion of the greatest inventors to have ever lived, and you told them you all now have to design one great project. You have to create the greatest invention of them all. The endurance of man's eyes into the future. And it is not enough to just seek personal legacy. Personal legacy is temporary to how long the species will stand. That means I realize, like, for how long can I care for my own words? When will it be that I will suddenly see that it's like the span of attention is moving timelessly through time. Time is moving through attention. The temporary is a projection in an eternal energy, but that energy, when it's conscious of itself, it is in a format. When it's not, when the consciousness returns to the unconscious, or as how Rumi, this poet, says, you're not just a drop in an ocean, you're the whole ocean in the drop. In the entire drop. So you're in the entire ocean in the drop. So what he's saying is that as you are living your individual life, and your inner realms are contributing to your to your individual life, your inner realms can also contribute to the collective life, and indirectly are, based on just how you are living in society as a being. For me, it's like, imagine you see a better way you can do something, and now imagine you don't try that. How would you feel? So I'm kind of looking at our civilization in a more macro view. And I'm like, why isn't the civilization moving? And you know what? It's hilarious. The people are waiting for the civilization to change, and the civilization can only change when the people do. There's a power of an ability to see, or you can say add dimensions, or perceive the stretching of dimensions subjectively. That means I'm kind of like how I feel when I give these talks is like, how you see an object and you can pick up that object and look at it from different angles. I feel sometimes when I look at a subject, I first have my own experiential angle, like my own opening, then I wonder what I know about other angles of it, and then eventually I dive in to see how far it can go. Because you see, the unknown that has nothing it needs to know. It's only the known that wants to know the unknown. And what I mean by that, or let me say it like this, what I mean by that is that in our conscious waking state, we find ourselves as a character to even have an existential story. But in dream states, or not even, let's say dream states, you can still be an individual in your dreams. You can, some dreams you're just sight. But anyways, you can have where was I? In a deep sleep state, we're literally not individuals. And I think it's a good idea to feel that, and all children should feel that they're asleep in the world. And the effort of life is to awaken to it, to awaken to all the dimensions of it that are unknown, but will one day be known. So, guys, before I end off, I felt like reading a poem that I wrote. It's a mystical kind of directed poem. Um, the poem is called, the poetry collection is called Rahmana. And I wrote it in 2016. It was part of this collection of writings I had where I called them the Divine Notes series, you know. So, anyways, of course, these are, you gotta see I'm just one person, and this is how my inner realms appear. So I feel like reading okay. So this is the 34th poem. The pen that has been in the hand of every poet. All right, let me just find this. Just a second, guys. I'm just scrolling through this PDF on my phone to find this for you. Okay, there we go. The pen that has been in the hand of every poet. So just keep in mind, I wrote this in 2016. And the audience will get kind of introduced to my voice on paper. The pen that has been in the hand of every poet. Has the title of an empty page astonished you? Does it seem that selflessness is through sincerity the greatest technology? What has made space dance with time? The pen that has been in the hand of every poet is one moment. Are secrets given away freely, or is there an exchange beyond the words of the mind? Do not be worried about the extra commas. From a vertical world, the horizon of all heavenly view can be found to be the spark of the moment's sacred touch. All poetry is divine movement in one moment. Do not doubt that the doubter is fearless behind unnecessary fear. Keep the heart of mankind clean and clear. For in purity and absolute piety, the world is unborn as one. How does the heart beat for you? Are tired limbs ready to fly beyond the ignorance of the scars of sacrifice? Perhaps this page is giving the mind of existence a chance to sing as an unhidden melody. Some human beings are called by the moon to write many lines of poetry for the sun. If you are one, with a capital O, if you are one of them, do not forget your divine nature. Raw talent is everywhere. May this secret never be kept hidden. You are the moment that the totality of existence has allowed revelation to be finally opened. The love of truth is an open window beyond any room. When the pen finds your hand, smile and set the world free. Your heart knows the words. Keep breathing. Within all worlds is the now of the now. That now, second now is with a capital N, and the poem ends. So, just to maybe create a fun kind of audience engagement thing. Someone can just shout a number. I'm just going to tell you between what? Between 1 to 48, somebody choose a number in the chat section. Let's see what comes. Let's see what words of mine from 2016 can find you. Guys, you can keep saying it. I can read the other numbers as well. All right, let's see. Number 1. When heaven returns. How does the pond throw stones into itself? Let's ask man. He might know better. And the way I've written know is N-O. He might know better. We are all the reflections of the divine in our own eyes. How does madness wear a jumpsuit? It is always up to you to dive into a new sky. For what is within you is always beyond you. So when heaven returns, that's the first one, guys. I should honestly open this in my laptop, guys. This is too much scrolling on a PDF on a phone. That's just hilarious. So just hang in there, guys. Just like a 30. Alright, guys. Here. This is so much easier. Now I could just Alright, so what's the next one? 32. Let's see. Okay, so 32 is Secrets of the Universe Within. So, just a second. Oh my god. What is this? Okay, there we go. Secrets of the Universe Within. Who moves your hand when after midnight your hand has reached for water in a glass as fridge doors open with one command? Trust yourself, it is all that we can do to be the purity of our own self-emanating truth. The cosmos has bestowed all existential beings with the divine gift. All that you seek is within all that is. Be the self that was always facing here facelessly. The glory of existence is a now, with a capital N, is a now that needs no ending. That means if we are imposing the meaning, then the meaning of the end is also meaningless. So what that means is now is the glory of existence. Now, right now that we're alive is like the truth is happening, you know. So all right, guys. So let's go on to 12. Let's see what number 12 is. You are your strength. That's the name of it. Okay. You are your strength. No one can give it to you. The universe cries some nights only because it has realized its existence in one verse. Do not fear the words of the undone. The world is not a trap, but a great allowance. Be so free that an empty sky smiles at every fading cloud. If you think this poem is short, what about the human lifespan? Love makes no mistakes until the very end. But even then, there is not a mistake. How could divine reunion be misplaced? So that's You're Your Strength, number 12. Alright, so number 44 is keep it going for the universe. Let's see. Keep it going for the universe. You may wonder through the eyes of despair why life has not brought romance in your divine comedy. Can a general be too general in front of his armies that want specific orders through the chaos? Is a question mark just a point and a curvy line? Reality whispers clarity in one moment that is too endless to be shaken by the belief of how others see self. Did you know that spirituality is your own exploration? Did you know, guys? Like, no, I'll get back to the poem. Right? So, did you know that spirituality is your own exploration? We all develop through the wisdom of a view unborn. Did the breath of Christ bend the nail? All resurrection is divine, even though some men are too cruel to see. The rulers beyond measurement are not here to measure omniscience. All presents are gifted in presence. So guys, just a quick pointer. This is so key. When you're in your presence, you're gifted by how the whole present moment is there. So anyways, all presents are gifted in presence. Do you know that you are God's talent to look in the mirror and see nothing through everything? How divine is control when the controller is in the hand of an idea? What makes temptation seek an inspiration of a mistress? What has allowed the novice to master the ignorance of self into absolute self-realization? Where does the fun of cosmic display come from? Is there a divine comedy at work? Let the soul feel at last, the soul of souls, that is a wordless world, in all that turns in the world of forms. Yeah. And, that's the last poem, guys. Like, literally, I think it's the last. Oh, no, it's not the last. I'm just going to search for eyes and to see if any of these poem titles have anything about eyes. So let's see. Because I want to see if it can relate to the theme. So, the sky moves for no one. That's one of the names of. Okay, guys, exactly. I can just feel it. It's. You must make a decision. I'm going to read that one. It's number 14. I'm kind of curious to know, like, what I wrote in 2016. All right. So, guys, this is the last poetic entry for the night. It's titled, You Must Make a Decision. When a book turns into a mirror without a reflection, you are enlightened. The free are born out of a desire of great transcendental bliss. Who has lied to you before you stood here? Sometimes we're professionals in self-deception. Never forget, child, clarity is an internal entrance into all externality. What suffices as a breath of a God is the ability to see the ocean in the drop. You must make a decision in order for the eons to have meaning in an instant. You must make a decision. That's like the last part of the poem. You must, you must make a decision in order for the eons to have meaning in an instant. And you know, kind of to relate it back to the talk, it's really like we underestimate everything. I feel we're opening up to how the or how the life of our world is simultaneously being the life of our mind. And this is opening up totally new avenues for, I feel like, studying psychology. That we don't know it yet. That it's not like a hood of a car, you open it up and check out that engine and, alright, now try to get that engine to work. You know, it's not like that. The human mind is interactive and it is alive in its environment. So technically, the site of our ancestors was the world. So our ancestors were extensions of the world. It's like suddenly, it's like this. It's like nature unconsciously happening. Then suddenly, this unconscious movement in nature became conscious of itself. So it was like, you can say the objective evolution for me personally began when the design of legs, the design of an ability to move on the surface of the earth appeared. Not on a bacterial level, not on like a very microscopic level, because there is this idea that life has survived an apocalypse on a microscopic level, but not on a, you know, on a higher level, you know. And that's a cool thing. That means regardless of how many asteroids hit this rock, there is a sort of memory. I mean, it depends. If the asteroid is too big, that's messed up, right? You know, I'm probably gonna write a story. Right now, I've got an incredible idea for a story, sci-fi story to write. And it is about that moment in history where teleportation technology is being mastered by our species, and the biggest like meteor is about to hit Earth. This giant meteor. And we suddenly master teleportation technology, but we only realize we can take 50% of the species. That would be a crazy sci-fi story too. I'm gonna work on that, guys. Maybe a few talks later I'll share it. But anyways, it's all about kind of realizing your eyes are like, they say the breath connects, you know, the outer world and the inner world. Or in ancient times they would say it's your connection to the spirit realm. So if you notice, why is it your connection to the spirit realm? Because your breath, like the waves of the ocean hitting like a sand beach, they constantly polish your subjective landscape. So all these talks that I've been giving, all the breaths that I've been taking, the physiology is like the space between the words, you know? You know? So it's like, could it be possible that temporal life is sandwiched between eternity? Somebody asked Plato, what time is it? And he was like, time is the moving image of eternity. And the guy was like, relax, man, relax. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful, and I'm accessible and available in School of Athens 2.0. So much blessings in us.